لا إله إلا الله.
What's your name, sir? Philip. Imran, nice to meet you. Just so I don't keep referring to you as a
So Adam is first prophet, right?
well,
So
there's a discussion regarding that, but the point is this.
Adam, Abraham, we can debate.
Yeah.
So if he was first prophet,
Yes.
then what book did he follow?
Like I've said,
Because as I said, you've got Aztec and Mayan culture, civilization, 6,000 years old. You've got Aborigines that are 4,000 years old. Okay, fine, they have nothing written. So my argument is, we've got drawings, Aboriginal, that are 40,000 years old. Aztec, Mayan, stuff, 6,000 years old. Okay, if Adam and Abraham, first prophets, then why don't we have scripture from them?
we don't even have the original copies of the Gospels, let alone what comes before that, right? So I don't see the point. I don't see the point you're making. I don't see the relevance.
This is the core of your faith.
What's the core?
The claim that we are descendants from Adam. Right? If we are descendants from Adam, then you need to put forward some evidence. You know, we've got dinosaur bones in almost every single country in the world's natural history museum that are thousands and thousands of years old. But yet we've got some Muslim countries that claim to have the body of Adam, sarcophagus, because remember Adam back then would be 90 feet tall.
Well, according to the tradition, they
So we have a brand new dinosaur skeleton, dinosaur skeleton they took away. In the Natural History Museum, we used to have a dinosaur skeleton that's hundreds of thousands of years old. But yet I don't have an Adam or a human being who's 90 feet tall standing next to him.
Okay. Now, you're making a separate point to your original point, because first it was about revelation, and now it's about fossils and so on and so forth. When it comes to fossils, just to make the point and go back to the original point, we don't have much fossils of any ancient human beings, to be honest with you. Right? Because even if you look at the evolutionary evidence, you can check out Sabur Ahmed's stuff online on YouTube. He's here regularly. There's not much as far as fossilization or fossil evidence is concerned of pre-ancient human beings is concerned. That's a side. I don't know how we got to that point. The main point coming back to revelation, the point to understand is this: we have the Quran, which is the final revelation of God, which is preserved. Okay. Now the argument is this: if the Quran is from God, then what God says must necessarily be true. So if God has said in the Quran that there were previous messengers, previous prophets who were given revelation, that there were messengers that God sent from the beginning, and so on and so forth, then we take what God says to be true, based on the fact that it comes from what source it comes from. Do you see the point?
You take it as being true.
Yeah, do you see the point?
I look at it from a different perspective.
So that's the discussion. The discussion is...
So my discussion was, if there's 130,000 messengers, you can't name me more than 25.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And there's nowhere in the world to tell me where the 125,000
There's a problem with your point right now. Firstly, you just said you don't take the Quran as the authority. Okay.
I don't.
So if you don't take the Quran as authority...
But that's your claim, not my claim.
Just a second. If you don't take the Quran as authority, then why go into the text and bring out a claim from the Quran? Do you see the point? So before you do that, let me just finish it.
Analyze the book. If your book makes a claim, how can I just think, oh, that's true?
Philip, just hear me out, please. One second. The point is this. The first thing we need to establish is whether the Quran is from God. Once that can be done, then what the Quran says must necessarily be true. Right? What you're doing is you're saying, I don't believe in the Quran, yet I'm going to go take a particular verse of the Quran, and I'm going to
So you don't question your book?
Sorry?
You don't question it?
We have many reasons to believe the Quran is from God. We can discuss
But
those
you
now.
never question it?
Sorry, never question?
Your book?
Absolutely. Well, me personally, I was at a point in my life where I wasn't always practicing Muslim. I didn't know anything about Islam. And I looked
So is that one
traditions.
point that you questioned?
I questioned, absolutely. I questioned
So
everything.
what was the answer to that?
The answer to that was that the Quran is without a shadow of a doubt the final revelation of God. Without a shadow of a doubt.
Fine. That's your belief.
Do you want the evidence?
So that one paragraph, which makes the claim that they spread to all corners of the earth, show me how that is true. That one paragraph.
So I'm showing you that now. Now,
who are they that venture to all parts of the
what it
earth?
seems like you're asking for is evidence, physical evidence, for that to be the case.
That one paragraph. There's many more, but
so the
that one
point that
paragraph.
the prophets came throughout history and they were spread all over the world into different nations of people for that to be proven to you, it seems like, correct me if I'm wrong, you're looking for some sort of physical, tangible evidence. Is that what you're asking for?
Of course.
Okay. So this is the problem with that. This is why we're not getting anywhere. What I'm saying,
I've got stone monuments in southern Turkey that are 14,000 years old.
Sure, but they're
civilizations, right?
They're fragments
they
of the
proclaim what they've achieved and what they've done. Even the king of Africa, with all his gold in his village, was the richest man in human being. So I have history of that. Where do I have history of your 125,000?
Here's my point to you, Philip. Like I said before, if you're looking for physical, tangible evidence, much of history regarding previous civilizations, much of it, yes, there's fragments. We have fragments of stones and tablets and so on and so forth. Let me finish my point.
Sounds like a cop-out.
Philip, you're not letting me finish.
That's a cop-out.
Philip, do you want a discussion or do you want to keep just making statements?
I'm waiting for you to give me some evidence.
No, well, you're not letting me speak.
It's all to interject one more.
Just 1 second, bro. Let me just make the point, and then you can bring back. Is that fair? Because then we can have a discussion. So you're asking for, the point I'm making is, as far as physical data of previous civilizations and previous people and previous nations and people that lived, is we don't have much of it. It's been lost to history. So it's irrelevant from that perspective. The point I'm making is this. Philip, let me make my point. What I'm saying, I'm giving you something better. What I'm saying is that the Quran is making the claim that there were messages sent throughout history and there were so many thousands of prophets. To establish that, what you need to do is establish whether the Quran is from God. Once you come to that conclusion, then what the Quran says must necessarily be true. That's great to prove than looking at scraps from history, because you don't have much.
But you would have to analyze all of the Quran.
Do you see my point?
I understand your point. But if I was someone new to your faith, not born into a Muslim family, right?
Yeah.
So I don't automatically subscribe to that book because my family is Muslim. Right? So if I was a non-religious person and I was looking to join your particular faith, then obviously I need to analyze the book.
Okay.
Just like any book, any faith, I need to look at it, I need to read it.
Have you read the Quran?
I have, yeah.
Okay, fantastic.
Many times. So there's many aspects of the Quran for me which are great stories written for the period for which it's written in. Just like any book that's linked to any faith. So 4,450 odd religions that have books all make a similar claim that their book is from God and they have to follow this path and things like that, which is fine. But then you need to show me and prove me that your particular book, your particular following is the one.
Okay, fantastic. So this is what I was trying to come to earlier, which is...
So then we analyze that book. And if I look at certain parts of any book, then I question it.
Okay, good.
And if I can't find an answer by talking to senior people...
So when it comes to the Quran, let me just ask you, just to get a bit of background. You said you studied the Quran. Number one, did you study in the Arabic or in the English?
Okay. I didn't speak Arabic.
And for your study, which is fine, there's good translations out there. For your study, did you just refer to the Quran, or did you take tafsir material, exegesis material, and study it together?
No, I get it from here, from Metro Road, the shop on the left, just up the road, many years ago.
Just the Quran?
But different versions, different types of the Quran.
But have you studied an exegesis of it?
What does it look like?
An exegesis is an explanation of the verses. And the
at the end of the verses. Yeah, like
have you
like the Bible.
Also, another key thing when you're studying the Quran from a critical perspective like you are, have you studied the usul, the foundations of how to study the Quran?
No.
Okay, so that's very important. That's very important because what happens is when you go to study the Quran with not the fundamental foundational principles of studying the Quran, what happens is you will take verses, you may take a verse, it may not make sense to you, and you take it in isolation and think that's wrong. Let me just finish the point. The point is that there are principles of understanding the Quran. Okay? One of the principles is that the Quran is understood via the Quran. Right? So other verses of the Quran explain a particular verse or concept of the Quran. Also, the entire Quran explains the particular verse of the Quran. Right? So these are principles. Also, you have the...
That's the same for the Bible, same for the Torah. So that's the same thing.
Let me just give you another thing. No, it isn't actually, it's different. But anyway, let me just make the point. Then you have, if the Quran, you don't find the Quran explaining the Quran or you want more information, then you go to the prophetic tradition and you go to the companions. Right? Then you take their testimony, their understandings of it, and then you have a holistic understanding of the Quran. Do you see the point? You also, when you're studying a particular verse of the Quran, you take it within the context of that surah. That surah roughly translates as, you can say chapter, but it's not really a chapter, right? But for the sake of discussion, you study the verse in correlation with the chapter and the historical background of the verse. Unless you've done that, Philip, you will have many problems in your understanding. Right? This is and I'm sure you.
So then God makes it difficult then.
No, I've just told you how easy it is. I've just explained the
Sorry,
principles.
the Archangel Gabriel.
Did you understand all the principles I've said to you?
I understand what you're
So
saying.
now when you go and study the Quran, it'll be easier for you because you know all these things. So you say, okay, now I'm going to study this verse. I'll study it within the context of the chapter, in context of the Quran, in context of what the
So then
Prophet
we should
said,
do that with all
and in
Abrahamic
context
books.
and we should do. It's a good method. It's a beautiful method. I think it's a phenomenal method. However, the problem with the Bible is because you don't have the original and there's been changes according to Christian scholars themselves, you don't have a base to start with.
We don't have the original either.
Absolutely, we do.
We don't.
Well, we do. Of course, we do.
Okay. How many prophets are there?
There's over how many?
But the main ones in the Quran, how many
25,
prophets?
I believe, are the main
Fine.
mentioned by name. 5 are the uniquely categorized ones.
So it's 25 prophets.
Well, no, there's many prophets. There's not 25 prophets.
In the
many
Quran, there's 25 prophets, right?
No, mentioned by name, yes. So let's not.
So Muhammad's one of them, right? Peace be upon him.
Yes, he's the final messenger.
So if you're saying that, what I'm saying is, so the other 24, what book did they follow?
Some of them were given.
Because modern day Quran is not the original.
Do you want the answer?
So they are.
Do you want the answer? Okay. So some of them were given original revelations by God, right? And some of them came to prop up and to propagate the previous revelations, right? The messengers and prophets. There's a slight distinction. It's a discussion in
So we don't have any of those books, right?
No, hold on a second. Let me just finish. We don't have the original preserved versions of any of the previous texts. Any. No matter what religion it is, right? But the point is this, we don't
We should follow those.
No, we don't need them because we have the final revelation which is preserved. And you said, no, it's not. The Quran is not preserved. Have you looked at the study of the preservation of the Quran?
Yes.
Okay.
So let me put it to a question
How
to
did
you.
Yes. How did you study the
Can
preservation?
you read the Quran in the British Museum?
I can read it, yes.
Okay. Can all Muslims read it? Because it's in a different language.
Majority of Muslims can read Arabic, yes.
Okay, but that's not
They may not
Arabic.
understand it, but they can read it.
But that's not modern day Arabic.
Well, yeah, ancient Arabic. Well, obviously, there's anyone.
Because in theory, you should have to understand that book.
Let me just finish the point. The Arabic is the same. The only thing that's different, it won't have dialectical markings. Yeah, it won't have dialectical markings. They were added later for the correct recitation and pronunciation of the Quran for non-Arabs, non-native Arabs, right? The words, the ayat are the same. This is the key thing to understand. So when it comes to, I don't know how far you study the preservation of the Quran, because if you look at the preservation of the Quran, it's the Quran, the predominant preservation of the Quran, it's an oral tradition. We have received it via mutawatir, which is recurrent reporting, right? So that's the main, because what people get hung up on is that, let me just finish the point. What people get hung up on is that, oh look, the Quran is a text, and if there's a previous manuscript which is a bit different or something's missing, therefore, oh my God, the Quran is not preserved. No, our primary mode of preservation is the oral tradition.
But didn't the third or fourth Khalifa ask for the other books to come back?
You're not listening to my point. If you're listening, you wouldn't ask the question, right?
But I'm asking that.
No, but if you understood my point, you wouldn't ask the question. Even if we had no physical copy of the Quran in existence today, hypothetically speaking, it would make no difference to the preservation of the Quran because the Quran is an oral tradition. It arrives to us from the Prophet, peace be upon him, via mutawatir. It's recurrent reporting, right? And also, how do you cross-check that? We have places in the world today, Philip, where there are young children, 8, 9, 10 years old, in parts of Africa. Here's the thing. They don't, check this out, they don't have a written language. Yet they have memorized the Quran in its entirety. And if you were to fly one of them over right now, get a hufad, someone who memorizes the Quran, they can cross-check each other and they will recite the same Quran cover to cover.
But for me, it's just a book. Written 1,500 years ago.
Do you not appreciate
just a book.
Do you not appreciate the magnitude of what I just said to you right now?
It's just a book.
Can you see it's preserved?
I could say the book of Confucianism is amazing.
But do you agree it's preserved? Maybe for you it's another book?
Preserved.
Yes. Okay, fine,
nice.
Fantastic. That because you didn't agree to that a few minutes ago.
That part is nice for the tradition
now you
passing
agree.
it down.
Okay, that's good. Because before you said you don't believe it's the. Okay. Before you said you don't believe it's preserved, but now you do, which is good. It's a good starting point.
I believe that it's preserved in the sense of the way it's been passed down by generations of people who can memorize every single word.
So it's preserved.
That part is not.
Okay, fantastic, excellent. So now, Philip, the point is for you see it as just another book. Okay, fine, that's fair enough, that's your position. What I will say now, if we know it's preserved, the only thing we need to do now, preservation is not a question. The only thing we need to do now is to see, and by the way, the preservation is a miracle itself, if you think about it. Because most texts from that, if you go back that far in history, are not preserved. I can't think of anything, maybe you know, and I don't know of any texts that are preserved from over 1,400, 2,000 years ago. Okay, so that in itself is a very strong proof that there's something very unique about this book because, you know, there's a very interesting verse in the Quran where God says, that He has revealed the Quran and He is its guardian. He's going to protect it. It's very unique. And what we find is that the Quran is indeed protected and is preserved. So that in itself is a proof that this has divine origins. But you may not like
It's
that.
very thin.
Okay, that's fine. I respect that.
That's right, guys. We need to memorize this book.
So let me give you-
learn it day in and day out,
Yeah,
like you see on TV in the madrasas, where those poor kids are just
Okay.
sitting there for hours, learning, reading, learning.
If you want
You can do
Philip,
that in any culture.
fine. But most cultures, I don't know of any other tradition that memorizes
They don't force it on a young child to do that.
If you go to, there's a channel called Talk Islam. It's called Quran Kids. It's a very beautiful video.
Yeah, it's on Skype.
Yeah, so that's a bit of a misconstrued point because majority of the youth, Muslim youngsters, obviously there are those people parents that force their children and so on, no doubt. But majority do it willingly because it's something you have to be willing to do. It's not easy.
Depends where they live.
Okay,
If they lived here in the UK, I would say maybe.
let's put that.
If they were in Pakistan or some parts of Africa, I would say probably
Okay,
not.
let's put that point aside. The key point is this:
We'd probably agree
although
on that.
forcing someone to do something and it's not correct anyway, but that's a side point. The point is this: let me build a cumulative case for you for the Quran being from God, because I know I gave you one, which is the preservation. You said it's a bit thin for you, right?
That doesn't say it's from God.
No.
Being passed down from generation to generation.
Yeah.
Yes.
What I'm going to do, Philip, is I'm going to give you a cumulative, a case which is, it's like file stacked upon file, to the point where from a probabilistic perspective, it's going to become impossible for you to sincerely deny that's from God. You may still deny it, but that's up to you, okay? So, preservation is one thing. Another unique feature of the Quran is that it's very easy to memorize. Right? Although a majority of the people that memorize the Quran in the world are non-native Arabs. They don't even know what the Arabic means, but they can memorize it. Right? And God says in the Quran that He's made it easy for you to remember, so you would remember it, right? So it's another very unique thing. Another thing that the Quran says, which is being evidentially and empirically seen in reality, which is kids from Indo-Pakistani backgrounds, from British backgrounds, who have no knowledge of the Arabic language, can easily memorize the Arabic, cover to cover. Very unique, very special. Another point, let me build another case. Another unique feature of the Quran
Still
is,
very weak.
sure, I'll give you more. I'm going to keep giving you more.
I need something strong.
Sure. It's building. Let me build the case. The third unique thing about the Quran is that the message of the Quran is in line with human nature. Now, what do I mean by this? When you look at the concept of God in Islam, for me, this is one of the greatest evidences of miracle. When you look at the concept of God in Islam, do you know the concept of God in Islam?
In which aspect?
Which is that who God is in the Islamic tradition. What's His essence?
Besides, it's 99 names.
Well, those are His names and attributes. Who is He? Who is God?
Well, nobody knows.
Okay. No,
Only two prophets met him.
it's not the type of personal knowing. I'm talking about knowing through information.
Only two prophets met him and spoke to him.
Let me give you a background of what the Quran says. What the Quranic concept, what God tells us about Himself in the Quran. He is Ahad, which means He is uniquely one, a one without a second, and a one you can't break into any parts. Right? He is unlike His creation. It's not a one that you can try to amalgamate with creation in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
Like the Christians would say God is one, but it's not Ahad because they break God into parts, and they say that He came into this physical reality, He's born in flesh. You may say Wahid in Arabic, but not Ahad. Ahad is He's uniquely one. Okay? He is As-Samad, which means He's absolute, He's eternal, He is completely independent. He requires nothing and no one. But everything in creation is completely dependent upon Him. Right? He was not born and He does not give birth. And there is nothing like Him. You can't compare Him to anything within this physical reality. Okay. In a nutshell, that's who God is. Okay? Now, that concept of God is, if you look at it cross-culturally, and you could do this yourself, go speak to many different people, whether they're atheists, agnostic, say, look, let me give you a concept of God. Does this make sense to you? If you were to believe in God, would this make sense to you? They would say this is in line with what feels natural. It's because it's a part of human nature.
It's in line with all the other gods and movies and media that is forced onto us.
Absolutely not. Because when you see concepts of God in the movies and media, it's totally different from what I've said to you.
No, it's not. It's the same.
Well, for example, you see old mythological movies where there's lots of mythology, and you have many gods fighting each other, and they look in physical form, and they're on earth. This is not God.
God of thunder.
No, we don't believe in that. There is no God of thunder. There is one God.
He's eternal.
No, but I'm telling you the Islamic perspective, right? And I'm telling you one of the miracles of the Quran is that God is unlike anything you can imagine. He's one. There is no other, right? Now this concept, if you were to take a child and put him in a desert island, and there's research that's done on this by Justin O'Barrett as well, and ask him, who made these mountains, who made these trees? They will say there's something behind them, there's a cause. If you were to press, I would argue, as to who this cause is, they will say there's one.
Depends where you get the child from. If the child is aware of religion, then he will say it was God.
No, there's research done on atheist children as well, by the way. Have a look at Olivera Petrovich.
A kid that goes to school would know about God.
Study
it's very hard
the
to
works
say.
of Olivera Petrovich. She's done study on children. I believe it's not religious children, it's children in general. And what she's seen or shown is that the belief in God is natural. So the belief of God in Islam is very natural. The concept of God is very natural. And I believe that is a very strong proof for God that this is from God, this book, this Quran. That's number 3.
So you're talking about God being the natural instinct of human beings.
So what I'm saying
but yet no one's actually seen God.
No, so what I'm saying is that the concept of God you find in the Quran is in line with human nature. The human understanding of God is natural.
But has any human being seen God?
No, you can't see God.
Has any human being spoken to
You can't
God?
see God. That's besides the point.
But then if I was to talk to someone from a different faith, a Christian, they would say that they have a conversation
But I'm
with
not
God.
arguing for a Christian God.
I'm just saying their point of view. They would say they have conversations with God, and on occasions they would see God.
Muslims have conversation with God 5 times a day.
But there's no response.
No, of course there is. If you look at the narration,
So God's spoken to you.
let me just make the point. If you look at the tradition of the Prophet, peace be upon him, in one of the hadith, he says that when the believer, the slave of God, in salah, which is connection with God, is translated as prayer, and he is praying to God, and each time he recites Fatiha, which is the opening chapter of the Quran, with each verse there's a response. God responds to it. So there is a very deep connection.
So have you heard him?
This is what I'm going to say. It's not the type of connection, the common type of human connection we have, which is the one we're having now. It's a much deeper and more profound connection. But that's besides the point. We'll come to it at the end. So that's point 3. Point number 4, and this is very profound. And I'm studying this right now. When you study the Arabic language and you look at the construct of the Quran, there's a lot of research that's been done on this. If you look at the Journal of Quranic Studies, there's a paper in this as well which points to these realities. The language,
Eloquency of the language.
the literary structure and eloquency of the language, it's beyond anything any Arab can ever produce. You know, at the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him, the Arabs were known for their literary skills, their language, right? For example, in the Kaaba.
He's meant to be illiterate.
No, but the ones that...
Someone to conquer many nations, I
but
don't
that's
think
the reason. The literate amongst them, the Arabs, they weren't known for anything else. But the literate amongst them, they had reached the pinnacle of the Arabic language. The structuring of it, the use of it for their poetry. Now, when the Quran came, this is why I believe one of the reasons the Prophet said that this was his miracle, is because when the Quran came, it de-scoped what they were doing. I'll give you an example in history.
But shouldn't that also be in the other books predating the Quran?
Not necessarily.
Why?
Because every prophet was given different
So
miracles.
how can God be eloquent in one book and not in the
I'm
other?
not saying God wasn't eloquent in previous books, but
we don't know what those previous books
exactly.
were.
So it's irrelevant to our discussion right now. So our discussion is about the Quran, right? So let's stick to that. The point being this.
The last book, Torah is first.
Sure, but we're discussing the Quran right now, so let's carry on, right? The point is this. That structure of the Quran, when the best, one of the best Arab poets at the time was sent to challenge the Prophet, peace be upon him, when he heard the Quran, he turned back and he left. Because he said, this is not from a man, this can't be produced by a man. Because he was someone that appreciated the structure and the use of the language, and he saw what the Quran was as something de-scoping the language, right? I'll give you a simple modern day example of what's going on here, just to put it in
I've heard that analogy before.
No, but let me make it real for you.
I haven't looked into it myself.
Okay, so let me help you with making it real, because at the moment it may be a bit abstract, right? Have you read a philosophy book? I'm sure you have.
Yeah.
Okay. So take a philosophy book, the genre of philosophy. Have you read a book on poetry?
Yeah.
Okay.
Long time.
Okay, fantastic. Have you read a science textbook? Of course.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, if you think about these 3 distinct genres, they're very unique in the style, right? For example,
they're only unique for the period which they're written in,
sure,
because they can
fine.
change.
That's fine. But what I'm talking about is the style, right? So take a philosophy book, right? Now you know what philosophy books known for? What are they known for?
Deep thought, they're deep
Thought, depth, wisdom, so on and so forth. They're not the most pleasant to read. You won't find poetry in a philosophy book, right?
No.
Okay. Now, what is a book on poetry known for?
Poetry.
Yeah, it's the beautiful sound, the rhythm, the rhyme. It's not known for its philosophy necessarily, or its textbook style of facts. Yeah? What's a scientific textbook known for?
For work on scientific theories.
So clear-cut, concise proofs, right? Evidences, certain
Yeah.
facts, is statements, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now here's what's unique about the Quran. And let me ask you this: if I was to ask you to take a philosophy book, the genre and the content of the philosophy book, take the skills of the poetry book, the eloquence and the style of the poetry book, take the factual nature of a scientific textbook, bring them all together, produce one book combining all of them together without losing anything from the original books as far as
I know
meaning
what
and
you're saying.
purpose.
I know what you're saying.
The answer is you can't do that. Because you'll end up, something will be compromised. Either the poetry, then rhyme will be compromised, either the depth and wisdom will be compromised, or either the knowledge will be, the scientific points will be compromised, the clear points will be compromised. What's unique about the Quran is that it combines all of these
I would
genres.
beg to differ. The scientific aspects of the Quran.
No science. There's nothing to do with science.
What do you mean nothing to do with science? There's a whole array of books.
No.
Where's the book then?
We'll talk about the scientific miracles and stuff
Claims.
later. I don't believe in that approach. That's the side point. But my point is, you're bringing all of these genres together, and it's in the Quran, and it doesn't take away in any way, shape, or form. For example, let me give you an example.
The idea is nice, but in reality, it's not true.
You haven't studied Arabic, Philippe. It's a very arrogant position to hold.
Name me one of the scientific proofs in the
I'm not talking
Quran.
about scientific proofs.
Well, why
It's a
not?
red herring.
Well, why not?
I'm talking.
Any.
I was making a point on the literary and linguistic miracle nature of the Quran, and you're taking it off to science.
That part's nice. I haven't
but-
studied that aspect of it.
Let me
in
finish
depth,
the-
so
okay.
I can't speak on that.
Sure, but let me give you something more.
The
on it.
scientific part, yeah.
No. Let me give you something more on it before we move on, because we're jumping the gun otherwise, right? So here's the point. The Quran brings all of these different genres and more together, and it loses out in no way. For example, you will get in a particular verse of the Quran, the word choice is perfect, it's precise. The depth and wisdom is beyond scope, understanding. The rhyme is beautiful, it works, right? It's there, it's clear rhyme.
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
The rhetorical devices used, for example, emphasis on certain words
Yep.
to make a certain point, is there. It's all there, and it doesn't take away from any of these styles or any of these particular things. Yet it brings them together, and it's hard to comprehend how a book can do this. It's almost, I would argue, a miracle. I won't say miracle, but something very unique and special, which suggests that this is not the product of a man. This has to be from a different source, a divine source. Do you see the point?
I understand your point. I may not agree
Have a
with your
look
point.
into it further, right? I'll give you some references at the end for you can go and study this.
That's your fourth point.
Sure.
Fifth
Fourth point.
Fifth
Fifth point. Okay. Is certain historical facts that are mentioned in the Quran. Okay. You've probably gone through those. You've probably heard those many times before. I don't need to go into detail. Okay. Sixth point.
Okay.
Let's see what we've done. Okay.
Has to be the scientific.
No. When it comes to the scientific miracles, I don't ascribe to the scientific miracles.
Fine.
And I'll break it down for you in a
Honest.
nutshell. There's a reason for it. Because science is limited. It's based on induction. It's always changing. Okay? The Quran is absolute.
Second part,
The
true.
Quran is absolute and from God. Therefore, I won't use something limited and changing to prove something that's absolute. In a nutshell. If you want to study this further, there's a very beautiful essay.
But then
by
doesn't it fall back on you to prove the claims within the book for scientific miracles?
Well, we don't. Why? I don't use the
But you
scientific
do.
miracles.
Trust me, there's a
I
whole
don't.
array of literature.
What am I, Philip? You're talking to me. And this we're going through.
From
this-
embryology to the shape of the earth to earth.
Well, I don't take that approach. That's not my approach. Because I believe science is limited and changing. The Quran is absolute. Therefore, why are you using something limited to prove something that's absolute? It doesn't make sense.
Just helps
It was,
make
a,
the
it, was,
claim even
it was
more.
a popular approach a few 20 or so years ago. But
Still
we have
is.
to be honest. We have to be honest. And if anything, it takes away from the Quran. I don't see why we have to do that. Science is a tool. It's a method we use to understand the world
So
around
honest
us.
answer.
Yes, there is mention of natural phenomena in the Quran. The Quran mentions the sun and the moon, and it mentions, for example, the water, and it mentions the earth, and it mentions these things. Absolutely. But I'm not going to make a claim of scientific miracles, because to claim that, you have to say that what science is saying is absolute, and it doesn't. You see?
Question for you.
Yes.
So,
Can I ask you a question? I haven't asked you any
wait, one more
questions.
last question, because it's getting exciting over here.
Sure.
The last question. So, if God is all loving, all knowing, all merciful, right? God knows our journeys before we do.
Yes.
Right? We may have choices in our life, but God knows those choices. Okay. So why does God create billions upon billions of human beings over the last few thousand years, knowing that they are going to go to hell and have a life of torture? Okay. Because He knows that they're not going to subscribe to Islam. They know they're going to believe in something else or not believe, but yet he still creates knowing that they're going to hell. So for me, that's not a merciful God.
What I would say to that is, one, your understanding is wrong regarding these concepts. Two, I'll say what God says in the Quran, where He says, فَأَيْنَ تَذْهَبُونَ, which is, where are you going? Meaning, we talk about everything else and everyone else, but where are you going?
So is there an opportunity for a non-believer to enter the kingdom of heaven?
Like I said, Philip, well, you need to first ask yourself. Absolutely. The point is, absolutely. The point is that's a discussion for the scholars to have. And I'll give you one of the nuances of that.
That's an honest answer.
Let me give you one of the nuances.
Because then I would say, then why do I need to subscribe to something?
I'll tell you. One of the nuances is, imagine someone that's living on this earth, never hears the message of Islam, never knows about God. On the Day of Judgment, they'll have the test, right? And God knows best how they'll be tested. But God is a just God. He's not going to throw them into hell just because no one brought the message to them. However, Philip, for you, if the messages come,
a possibility.
No, but if the messages come to you, yeah, there's a possibility, absolutely. For someone that hasn't had the message, I never say that God is going to put them in hell. God is going to judge them, because if they've never received the message of Islam, then God will give them a test on the Day of Judgment. Right?
So is God loving when He sends those billions of human beings to hell?
So back to the question, just to finish your original point. But when it comes to yourself, Philip, and like God says in the Quran, we worry about everyone else and we'll discuss those things, but where are you going, Philip? If the messages come to you and you're rejecting it, what's your state going to be after you? That's the question you need to ask yourself.
That doesn't make me a bad person.
No, I'm not saying it does. What I'm saying is that you have to really
God
question
would
these things. Sorry?
God would know.
Yeah, but if God has brought the message to you over and over again, when you come to places like Speaker's Corner and you speak to Muslims, and you know that I've told you the concept of who God is today. I've told you that. I've told you proofs for the Quran, the miracles, the signs of the Quran, right? I've told you about the Prophet, peace be upon him.
God would need to decide, right, a non-believer who does good work, like what you talked about before, the good aspects of being good, but yet I could be Muslim and I'm on Edgware Road participating in gambling and betting and smoking and drinking, but I'm still Muslim. So when I go to heaven, right, and maybe I do Ramadan every couple of years, sometimes I don't, I'm still Muslim. So you have a Muslim who doesn't follow scripture to a T, but yet you have an individual who doesn't partake in any of those substances abuse and things like that, but is generally a good person.
Yes.
So then God's theory about who goes into heaven is kind of like...
No, because there's an underlying thing there.
There are 7 different levels of heaven, but which heaven do I...
Here's the thing, Philip. You made a good thing. So firstly, if there's any Muslims watching this, because many Muslims I don't fully practice, to be honest, yeah? Many Muslims don't fully practice. But for them to understand this, that when they say La ilaha illallah, there is no deity worthy of worship except God alone, if they've said this, those words are so weighty that they themselves can carry anyone into heaven, right? It's about understanding and appreciating the nature
even
of the value.
though they're
absolutely
bad Muslims.
They
Muslim in name only.
Yeah, they may be punished. Yeah, they may go through.
Maybe.
God knows best, because we can't go specific.
So maybe I can get to heaven.
No, but you're saying the opposite. You're saying, say if someone denies God and lives a very good life and does good things. What I'll say to you is this: what you're undermining is how severe is the crime, the punishment of denying God, right? Which leads to such a punishment. That's where you need to question yourself. That's what you need to ask yourself. And just to give you
Only God can have that.
Just to give you another perspective on that. Imagine you say you do good, but you don't believe in God. Where did you get good from without God?
The same terminology you used maybe half an hour ago, the depiction of someone who follows your particular faith. You can do that without following your faith.
Yeah, you could be good without God.
Yep.
However, what is good? What is good? Without God, what is good?
Being generous, being kind,
yeah, but where'd you get these concepts
family,
from?
Looking after people.
Where'd you get these concepts from?
Natural instinct.
Well, our random physical
Survival
process.
of the fittest.
It doesn't make sense.
You look after
you just contradicted yourself.
Have it?
If it's about survival of the fittest, then why would you be selfless and care for humanity?